right, everybody. We got John O'Callahan from the Maine to talk about his solo project, John the Ghost. How's it going,
Hello,
brother?
hello. I am well. How are you?
I'm great, man. Where are you at right now?
I am currently in our band's new studio that we just bought
Cool. What
in
what location?
Arizona.
Oh, in
I'm in
Arizona.
Arizona. Yeah, Phoenix.
Okay, I was just about to say it's been crazy good weather here in Los Angeles past couple days. So I was wondering if you were sharing it with me. But Arizona, I mean, probably not too bad right now at this time of year either, huh?
Yeah, we're sharing some of that good weather. It's actually it's kind of been a godsend. Like we've had some overcast, and
Mhm.
it's like this has been our winter.
Right,
So
right.
it's like we're getting a little bit of rain, and yeah, it's kind of nice to change it up.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. It rained, I think, last week, really quickly. But yeah, I mean, with all the things going on in the world, it's nice that at least sometimes we got nice weather still here in Southern California and Arizona.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So, I know you got your self-titled "I Only Want to Live Once" debut solo album coming out. But before we talk about that, can you take us all the way back and just let us know how you got into music?
Yeah. When you asked me prior to the taping or the recording, I'm like, oh man, I don't my memory is so bad. I was like thinking about like where do I even start? Like what's my first memory? And then I was like, oh, that's not even
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Well,
don't know.
maybe
But
this will be good for you then. Maybe
yeah, yeah.
you'll get to think back a little bit. I mean, were your parents into music? Do you remember how you got into music? Did you have an older brother or cousins or
Yeah. So
friends?
I think my love for music stems from my father first
Mm,
and foremost. I think there was always music playing at my house. No one in my immediate family is musical per se, but everybody enjoys music. So nobody played instruments other than my uncle um, on my dad's side, and then I had an uncle who passed away when he was like mid 40s, but he was a huge influence on my family as far as music goes. Inspired my cousins to start playing guitar, and then that's kind of where I was like, I had older cousins, so I wanted to sort of emulate that, and I wanted to learn how to play Smoke on the Water on
yeah.
bass. And so it sort of it was like I guess it stemmed from all of those things, and then sort of kept being perpetuated by my dad being like, yo, have you ever heard of Steely Dan? Have you ever heard of this? Have you ever, so it was just
Yeah.
like, it was always around. And then my parents really facilitated that love for music by buying me my first guitar, I think when I was 12.
Mm.
Um, and I haven't really, I mean, I picked it up and I played it. And then I got so frustrated at such a young age that I kind of gave it up. And then sort of in high school, this program Fruity Loops, I got my
Yeah.
hands on it. I
Hmm.
ripped it on online.
It's funny.
And
Everyone I've interviewed a lot of artists and just people who I know, like everyone says they ripped Fruity Loops. Sorry,
yeah,
Fruity Loops.
yeah,
I'm sorry
I
that
know,
so many people didn't pay for you, but you're getting a lot
I
of
know.
advertising and word of mouth, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. So then high school rolled around, and I had a bunch of buddies that were playing music. They were in bands. Um, and so I was front row at all the shows. I didn't play music, but I just loved it. I kept
Yeah.
loving it. And then Fruity Loops ripped it, and I started to kind of create like nonsensical arrangements of music and beats and stuff like that. And then it wasn't until college rolled around that I really wanted to give music an actual shot. So I tried out for the band that I'm in, and that was my first band. And the rest is history.
Yeah. So what you that was in high school when you tried out for the Maine? Is that what you said?
It was my freshman year of college.
And
So
and when you say tried out, so there were some guys and they needed a singer, and so did you know them or were they friends of friends or?
yeah, so the manager of our band is one of my best friends. I've known him since sixth grade.
Mm,
His name's Tim Kirch. He His youngest brother is Patrick, who is the drummer of our band. They were in local bands. Garrett and our bass player Garrett and Patrick were looking for a new singer, and I got drunk at a party in college and told Tim, like, hey, I want to try out for your brother's band, man. And I think he just kind of shrugged it off.
Yeah.
And then that next morning, I did the hangover walk into the room, and I remember playing, like, again, I don't consider myself a guitar player or, you know, an instrument player of any sort. So
Right.
I kind of stumbled through this song, and I sang a song by a band called Ivory, who was from I think like Wisconsin. And yeah, they were like, we dig it. And then the first summer came around that we were a band, and we wanted to go on tour, and we just booked some shows and hit the road.
Nice. So it's nice that it was kind of organic. You knew the manager and kind of connected you with the band. How did that first tour go?
Oh, it was terrible. As far as like, if we're talking like success, the success was the fact that we came home in one piece. I mean, nobody came for sure. It was like very, I mean, nobody came for our first couple tours as a band. You know,
Yeah.
it was like, it definitely, we took a lot of time corresponding with people via MySpace. So MySpace was like such a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
Everybody had it, and we would spend 4 hours a day a person on that, and we would just talk to people in different parts of the world, different parts of the country.
Wow.
And try to like convince people to like come out to shows if we were ever going to go on tour. And so Tim DIY booked a tour. We were in our bass player Garrett's parents' Suburban van with like a trailer that was attached. And
nice.
He actually just showed me a video of like the first couple days of tour. And it was like we had, I think somebody was on the phone telling their parents like, yeah, we're gonna have a show in a couple of days. And we literally spent like 3 days in a Walmart parking lot, not doing anything, just like talking about the band. Like we didn't have anything really booked. So but that's the thing, is like looking back, those are the fondest memories I have, like some of the most fond, if not the fondest, because it was all so new. And I remember driving through New Mexico on our first stop for gas. I think we were getting food and snacks, and I grabbed like a cup of noodles, and I vividly remember saying like, I could eat cup of noodles every day if it meant that we could go on tour every day. And it was like, and so we did it. So
that's awesome. Yeah, it's something I think to remember for artists who are just getting started, that it's just like childhood, you know, it's nostalgia. You look back on with those, you know, you may not have been able to do all the things you wanted to when you were a kid, but you look back at those times when you were a kid with such fondness. Same, I think, early in a career, especially something fun like being in a band. So that's awesome that you guys were so dedicated, though, at least with the hustle. You said you were spending hours each every day reaching out to people. Did that pay off at all? At least that avenue of trying to connect directly with people via MySpace back then?
I mean, I'd like to think it did. I like to think it played a part. I think, you know, I think the reason, I mean, 100%, the reason that our parents sort of, you know, my parents especially, let me drop out of college, let our guitar players both drop out of college, is like, I think things started to happen rather quickly for our band. And, you know, my mom gave me an emergency credit card and was like, if you need to book a hotel, like, use this. And I took that sort of as a challenge. Like I prided myself on not using that for gas, not using that for anything. And fortunately, we didn't have to use that stuff. And we started to put things together. And just like you said, we started to hustle as hard as we could. And fortunately, things kind of picked up. So when that first summer went by, you know, we didn't really have like numbers to show for it. Like we didn't have, but we put out our first EP and got signed to Fearless Records. And it was like things kind of, I don't know, for people, and even for us at the time, like when you hear record deal, a lot of people associate that with like, oh, you've made it. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Uh-huh.
it could be further from the truth, right?
Right.
But, you know, for parents that are really worried about their kids going to college, you know, that made a whole lot of sense to them. Like, oh, you got a record deal, like you're going to be good for a
Right.
while. So
Right.
fortunately for us, I think the correspondence online, and then just part of that hustle of like flyering shows when we went, you know, we went to Warp Tour and didn't play it, but just like, you know, you hear the stories of bands like our buddies Mayday Parade who sold like 10,000 copies of their EP at Warp Tour and
It's
like followed
funny.
it. And
It's funny you mentioned them because interviewed them recently, and I was just about to say I heard the exact same story. You know, they using Warp Tour as kind of like a promotional tool, even if you're not on the tour, which I think is so genius. And I literally was just thinking about that yesterday, and how how much of a bummer it is kind of that Warp Tour doesn't exist, you know, as of a couple years ago in the way that it did. You know, I don't know what the plan is. I know they're going to do select shows here and there now, but it was such a thing. Every
it
city,
totally was.
it was such a crazy cool project that that went on for so long, and so it's a shame to see it go. I hope it comes back in that capacity at some point, but like I said in the Mayday Parade interview, I totally get why they probably went in that direction. One being that they were probably looking at Coachella and these festivals, and they're like, these guys put in the effort for like a couple weekends and make a killing, and we're
Yeah, yeah.
meanwhile we're putting this production on in every single city. I think it had to do with a little bit with pop culture, but then again, I feel like punk and pop punk and all that stuff seems to be a resurgence. So you know but yeah, so tell me a little bit about how you went from having a a not great first tour uh to having Fearless Records saying, hey, let's sign you guys.
I mean, it,
You told
it's
me
kind of a,
one of your strategies, which was a lot of time put into just individual fan reach out through social media, which is awesome. Were there and flyering at Warp Tour, was that a game changer? Do you think that was one of the key things you guys were doing?
I mean, I'd like to think in my heart of hearts that like the music had something to do with it.
Sure,
I'd like
sure,
to
of
think like,
course.
people just started to associate themselves with what we were doing, and then telling people like word of mouth vibe.
Right.
But I don't know. We had kind of been courted by a couple different record labels at the time.
Mm.
Fearless just felt like the most like they understood it the most, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Like,
Yeah.
I guess even when you're 19 and you're in your first band and you're writing your first songs, you still even subconsciously have some sort of vision for what you're doing, even if it's trying to rip off the Replacements or do something, whatever it is. I felt like we at least had a collective mind to say like, this label sees it the way that we do, or at least is entertaining us that in that light. So I guess from there it was just like, we started to get some plays going on Pure Volume and on MySpace, and people started sharing the material, and we just sort of like, we didn't leave the road once we got on it. Like we just hustled and grinded out these cycles, and we made our first full length, and then we got on a huge tour. We were the opening slot on the soundtrack of my summer tour, which was
Nice.
Boys Like Girls and Good Charlotte and Metro Station. And it was like
Yeah.
this convergence of like all these huge bands having huge songs at the same time, and then us opening. And
Nice.
we took it as like, this is a huge opportunity. And I would say from that point on, we sort of like we had a van at the time, and I think we were somewhere in Florida, and the night before the show, at the previous show, we went out to say hi to anybody who would say hi to us. Like, oh wow, you want to take a picture? Hey, did you watch the show? Did you like the music? Yada yada.
Yeah.
Um, and a couple people signed our van,
Nice.
and it was like we had just bought this van. It was like money that we got from the record
Yeah.
deal,
Yeah,
and
maybe it
we were
wasn't
like,
nice. I don't know. How'd you feel
yeah, we
about
were
it?
like super bummed out. And so the next day I was on stage, and I mean, you know, we played sometimes for people walking in. Sometimes we would play for half the crowd, but half the crowd would still be several thousand people. So I said, and I shouldn't have said it, but it's like don't touch the red button. And
Yeah.
I said, hey, we're gonna be hanging out after the show. If you could just don't sign the van. I know somebody signed it, and then we came back out, and the thing started to get covered. So we began to embrace it, and we sort of I use that as sort of like a visual reference of like that's the equivalent of how we act after shows. Like we're
Mhm.
very accessible. We like to make it a point that we're no different than other people, and we sort of work that into, I think, a reason why people like our band is just um I don't know, not accessibility, but like I would like to think it's like people could see themselves being in our position, if that makes
Right.
sense. Like
Yeah.
starting a band and building it up, and then not forgetting that like the reason that you're there is because of the people that show up. So um yeah, it was just like just one thing after the next, one tour after the next. We honestly didn't stop. So
That's cool, and I think that's awesome. You have a van just signed by a bunch of people in all the different areas you go to. It's like such a tangible, fun thing, you know. It's
yeah, yeah.
did the nonstop touring help you get that attention as well from Fearless, or did that kind of go hand in hand? Did they kind of catch you right as you guys were starting to take off in that direction?
It's actually funny. I watched a video of the showcase that we played for Fearless,
Hmm.
and it was a corner stage in Fullerton, California,
Hmm.
at a place I want to call it the Alley, and
Hmm.
that's all just like logistics. It doesn't even matter.
Right.
Um, but I remember we played the showcase for we played it before Doors. So we weren't even on the bill. They just had us play before the concert. And so we had to play this show to impress these adults that were going to sign our record deal
Yeah.
to nobody. And
Yeah.
so
That's
it
interesting.
was like, yeah, at the same time, right after that, we had to drive to New York in a GMC Envoy just from Phoenix in order to get a booking agent, because the booking agent wanted to see us play. So we drove from Phoenix all the way to New York.
Wow.
Um, and again, we played in a venue at like 4 p.m. to 6 adults. We played terribly. Like, I
Uh-huh.
don't know what they could have seen. Maybe it was just the fact that we drove from
Yeah.
Phoenix to New
Yeah,
York.
the
But
effort you made.
um, yeah, it was just, it was kind of a simultaneous thing. We signed a Fearless, then we signed a booking agent deal, and then it was just like, again, just go on the road and figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, and then so like you said, things were moving. I think it's like things were moving quickly for you guys because you guys were moving quickly and you were ready and willing to move quickly, which I think sometimes, ironically, artists aren't able or willing to do, which is funny. You know, it's like it's kind of counterintuitive sometimes. I think. You know, I think some people think that one day, you know, someone's going to knock on their door and be like, "Oh, now you get to quit your day job, and you have everything you need in order to be an entertainer or something like that. But they
Yeah.
don't realize that it doesn't work like that. You have to be in a position to make it work until it really does work like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when you were talking about Warped Tour, it's like a lot of older people, like I would consider myself and our band an older band at this point, but I would say a lot of older musicians and just people in the industry would say like, oh, these kids coming up, they'll never understand what it means to grind. And I would argue that, you know, the environment has changed, right? It might
Totally.
be more virtual, but I think the grind remains the same. And I think that talent will be discovered. I mean, it's so apparent. There's so many artists that make records in their bedroom nowadays that end up being heard by, you know, millions and millions of people, and for good reason. And I think that it's a really amazing time, and it's really a wild, you know, if I look at things in retrospect, it's wild to be sort of on the tail end of the MySpace generation,
Mhm.
and then being thrust into whatever the hell else we had to kind of adapt to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kind of in the streaming era, I would say.
yeah, yeah,
Spotify's kind of like the the epicenter, I feel like, of metric anyways right now.
totally.
But yeah, it depends on, I totally know what you mean though. I feel like artists today have access to more ears, but then again, they got to fight through all the noise of the other people who have that access.
Sure.
And
Hmm.
and I definitely don't agree with whoever might say that artists nowadays aren't grinding as hard, because I feel like artists nowadays have to be their own manager, their own, graphic designer. That
For sure.
they're grinding, so some of them anyways are grinding so much harder than I'd say some artists of the past. I was watching, I forgot what documentary it was. It might have been that documentary, Sound City. Is that what it was called, with
Oh
Dave
yeah, yeah,
Grohl? And
yeah,
it might
yeah.
have been that one, but I think it was an interview with Paul McCartney, and he was just baffled by the fact that there's artists now who play without being paid. You know what I mean? He's
Yeah,
just like,
yeah,
it's like, how,
yeah.
why does it work like, because I
Hmm.
mean, and that's the Beatles played for a long time, but like, apparently they were getting paid. and
Yeah,
and I mean, so many artists are doing it just for the love of it, or for the opportunity to maybe do it for money at some point. So there's definitely hustlers out there, 100% still.
for sure.
So the Maine epic, you guys went big and did all these great things, but we want to talk about John the Ghost, your solo project. So tell us a little bit about that. You've been dropping singles, and now you're going to drop a solo album called I Only Want to Live Once. So tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about how that project got started in the first place, because I know it started a few years ago, around a little more than a few years ago now, around 2016. So tell us how it got started, and tell us where it's going now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all stems from the idea that um, as a songwriter, I don't feel like uh, I feel like it's really crucial that you continue to write songs far beyond the 10 or 11 or 12 that come out on a record. That's the only way that you try to better yourself and try to write better songs.
Yeah.
So I had and have had just an abundance of songs just in the ether. And in 2016, I compiled just a couple of them. And at the time, I was living in a garage at my manager's house. And it sounds a lot dingier than it was. It was like a converted garage, but
Uh-huh.
um, it was kind of a space where it was like a makeshift studio. So I did the recording for an EP that I put out in 2016. I did all the recording there. And the take at the time was like expressing myself in a different light than I can, or than I thought or think I could with the Maine. And so the songs were all very subdued, and I was pulling a lot from like Sea Change by Beck, and like Red House Painters and stuff
Mm.
like that.
Hmm.
So it was very like acoustic heavy,
Yeah.
slow tempo, like slow to mid tempo.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of shelved it. Like I didn't do a ton with the songs. I've only played 2 shows with that. And then I guess this past year or the beginning of 2020, I started writing for the Maine, and for the first time in a long time, actually, for the first time ever, I was able to record ideas on the road. And we were in Europe in like February, beginning of March. I think it was like towards the middle of February, and
Yeah.
I had like, I don't know, at the time I might have had like 20 something odd stems for ideas.
Mm.
And so long story short, we made a record for the Maine, which is almost done. We're like just finishing up mixes.
Nice.
But I had all these excess songs. I had songs that were intended for the Maine. They were ideas that I had with the thought and the intention of like, hey, these could be for the Maine's record.
Right.
And then I had all this time, you know. I
Yeah.
talked a lot about touring. I talked a lot about grinding. Well, for the first time ever in the past 15 years, I had an overabundance of time. I had nothing
Mm.
but time.
Yeah.
And so I took those songs, I took those ideas, and I just expanded on them. And I was talking about this with some buddies today, but it's like, you know, I have the luxury of having had 8 opportunities with the Maine to put out records and to, you know, express myself creatively. I've had that experience. So when it came time to like compile these songs and put out an album as John the Ghost, it's not like it's not precious, because I'm still precious about what I put out,
Yeah.
but I'm just less I'm less like nervous of the vulnerability of it all.
Mm.
I'm less in my way than I
Hmm.
ever have been, because I've been afforded the opportunity to be in the studio and make records. So this is just a compilation. Like I put out my first single called Rolled Down Window.
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of like the song that sparked the idea of like, hey, maybe do another one and then do another one. And then I was like, well, I have a bunch of ideas. Like, I'll just do an album. So there's 9 tunes on it. It's like just barely an album.
Yeah.
But
Hey, that.
the vibe is all over the place, which I love. It's not really like I don't think you can lock it down. There's some groove to it. There's some tempo. There's also some slow, sad stuff that I know people that like the early stuff will appreciate. And
Mhm.
so yeah, it's nice to be able to put something out that I'm proud of, and that I didn't have to like discard. I didn't have to put it in the trash bin and like wait another 2 years until I started writing main stuff to like hopefully give these songs a shot. So
Yeah. Did you go in a different direction than you did? Because I know these, like you said, these were just kind of like the beginnings of some ideas that you had for the main. Since they ended up not being tracks for the main, did you go in different directions with some of these than you thought you might have with the main?
oh, for sure. Yeah. I would say all of them.
Mm.
You know, I don't have, when I'm working on stuff by myself, I don't have like somebody over this shoulder saying like that, I don't really like that, or somebody over this shoulder saying like, I love that, like keep going there.
Yeah.
I had my buddy Matt Keller, who plays in a band or played with a band called Lydia. They're from Arizona.
Hmm.
He's an awesome producer. He helped me co-produce the whole thing. And it was just like, I would give him the skeleton of the idea, and then we would just sort of like take it to where we were both really excited about it at that moment in time. And
Yeah.
then, you know, a couple of weeks later, I put vocals down, and we still felt, you know, fired up about them. So, but yeah, I think there's so many factors that kind of tie you down to um, it having to be different, because I didn't have the luxury of having people play guitar other than myself. And like I said, my ability is very limited. So it's like, what you hear on the record is going to be me, and that's what I can do. So um, hopefully it's enough. But like I said, like I'm just excited that people want to hear things from me, and
Yeah.
I feel like it's a really fortunate position to be in. So I'm really humbled by the whole thing. So
Yeah, it's cool because you whatever what you excel at and where you may be limited, those just become parameters of the music you make, and
for
different, and
sure.
those different parameters make different kinds of music, which is cool. So I'm stoked I got to talk to you because I'm in a band called the Eiffels. We played Warped Tour a few years back, actually the last Warped Tour, and that's actually when I got turned on to the Maine, because they send us promo materials or whatever, as I'm sure you know,
Yeah, yeah,
and one of the promo materials included one of your guys' songs. Do you remember that? It
yeah,
included that
yeah,
song
yeah.
"Bad Behavior," and I was like, this song's catchy, and so I looked you guys up, and I've had that song on some of my playlists ever since. So love that song, and so I was stoked to see you in the interview list here. So I was glad I got to talk with you today, John. When can
Hell
we see
yeah.
this? When can we expect the album to drop?
February 12th is when it drops. And I appreciate the kind words. Thank you very much. Yeah,
Yeah, that
it's
song's an earworm. It's I
I
there's
appreciate
something
that.
really catchy about that song. It's almost like a 90s pop rock sound or something. I feel like it might be accessing something in that department
We
in my
love Third
brain.
Eye Blind, so anything rhythmic like that is like exactly what we love.
I do
So
too. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's the part you're accessing in my
there
brain.
you go.
But we like to end the interview by asking, if you had one piece of advice for aspiring artists, what would it be?
I always say it, but it really and I really should like try to come up with my own catchy like way of saying it, but the just do it slogan by Nike is like that I will, next time I talk to you, I'll have a catchier way of saying it.
Uh-huh.
But I would say that that is like the most important thing. Everybody, people ask me all the time on tour. I'm a singer, I'm a songwriter. Like, what is your piece of advice? And I think making yourself vulnerable only opens yourself up for the idea of getting better at your craft, whatever you want to do.
Mhm.
If it's creating, wooden tables, it's like you have to make. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to curse on your
Go
show,
ahead.
but
Yeah,
you have to
you are.
you have to make a shitty table
Uh-huh.
in order to get that out of the way to make a beautiful table,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's it's never going to be exactly how you want it to be. The very, even at album 8, it's like there are things already that I would like to go retrack and recut, but it's like you just have to put yourself out there. You have to make yourself vulnerable. I've so many times I didn't want to do things because my ego, got in the way and said, no, they're not going to like it, or they're not going to like you, or you're not good enough at guitar, or you're not good enough at singing. And
Mhm.
really, it's all about developing your own craft and making yourself vulnerable and putting yourself in those positions to learn from yourself, to learn from your mistakes. So
Yeah. Well, they say fail more.
just do it, or
Yeah.
just I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out.
Well, actually, I just down the street here in Highland Park in Los Angeles, someone did like a mini mural of Amelia Earhart, and so I assume that they actually did the research, and this is truly a quote from her. So I'm going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
quote this mural, but I guess it's an Amelia Earhart quote, and it says the best way to do it is to do it. You know,
There you
so
go.
and so I mean, and of course the Nike slogan's such a popular slogan, and like you said, it's true. You got to do it, and I've heard so many times from so many successful people, Michael Jordan, I think being one of them, is just like fail more. The more,
Absolutely.
the more times you fail, the more knowledge you have, the more wisdom you got. So
Absolutely.
Bringing it backward.